Peace family, it's your girl T, aka Nappy-Headed Jojoba. Not Nappy, not Jojoba. Nappy-Headed Jojoba. You have to say the whole thing. It's like handsome boy modeling school. Any of y'all agree that it's time to change the way we talk about colorism? Anybody? Just me? Okay. I've spoken on colorism before, but it was a long time ago, back when I think conversations around colorism were really just beginning to come to the forefront in mainstream discourse. At least in black spaces they were, and in quite a few IPOC spaces also too as well. So I think we're past the point of anyone not really knowing what colorism is, because the conversations have not stopped, and I don't think they've slowed neither. Big part of why that is colorism itself has not stopped or slowed. It is very much still a problem, as is featureism, which makes sense because colorism and featureism go hand in hand. Another problem, though, is the way that colorism tends to be talked about, because what I've noticed is that it is nearly always confronting the problem through the prism of desirability. Specifically, from what I see online, colorism is most often called out because some male makes it known that he is not desirous of dark-skinned women and or unambiguously black women. A backlash ensues, or it doesn't, and then the same thing happens all over again the next day. Lather, rinse, repeat. Which begs the question, why do we only look at the problem of colorism in this way? Don't we have bigger things to be fighting for? And that is a segue to today's sponsor, Aura, because one thing that's definitely worth fighting for is your privacy. Have you ever Googled yourself? Because I have, and I was shook by what came up on a bunch of public listing sites about me and my family members. If you've never done it, you might be freaked out when you see what's out there from searching your own name. Might pass out if you see what's actually on the dark web. Data is a whole industry, and companies selling your address and phone number, that's the least of it. It can be far worse than the non-stop robocalls and far more invasive. Or it can find the data brokers selling your personal information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf, which these brokers have to do by law once you tell them to, by the way. So you may as well let Aura do it for you. Hit up my link to get 2 free weeks to try Aura and start protecting your information. With Aura, you get a VPN, antivirus protection, parental controls, password management, and identity theft insurance, which saves you from having to download mad apps to do all of those things one by one by one. And it saves money since you're getting all of these protections in one place. So if you're ready to do something about the data creeps profiting off of selling your private info, head to my link. Once again, it's linked in the D box, and start your 14-day free trial. While I do think it has been worthwhile and necessary to clock colorism when it rears its ugly head, shaming a colorist in some comment section is not going to change that person. At best, they'll say less. The only thing they might learn is to not be colorist out loud anymore. Maybe they won't tweet their moronic hot takes about why they only deal with red bones anymore, you know? Or they will keep on tweeting. Maybe they'll really lean in and start a podcast and monetize their anti-blackness. Either way, ain't no fixin' these colorist males. Don't save them. They don't want to be saved. Colorism commentary, like any commentary, does not exist in a vacuum. So I do think that the proliferation of proudly colorist males in the comment sections has a direct relationship with the myriad malosphere podcasts, which then has a direct relationship with the types of commentary we see calling out colorists. It's kind of a perpetual motion machine of outrage at this point. But this is my exact issue. Like I said, ain't no reforming a colorist, so why do we care? Why even engage with them? And that goes for colorist women too, because that is most definitely also a thing. It just doesn't seem to have the same prevalence, at least in terms of being vocal about it, compared to what we see with these males. Plus, patriarchy is a major factor in why so much of the colorism commentary as it exists currently is, frankly, male identified. So that's why I'm more focused on colorist males to make this point about moving on from centering our critiques of colorism in desirability. There are far worse effects of colorism than not being desired by an ancient who is pressed about undesirable males finding them desirable. It's loony. When it comes to colorism, we need to move on from almost only talking about black males who point blank don't like black women. Because, and I can't stress this enough, we don't like these males either. Don't like them, don't want them. Imagine thinking internalized anti-blackness is a flex. Girl. Which is why none of us need to be out here blocking our blessings by trying to argue down conquered males. It's embarrassing. There's a profound lack of self-awareness here with these colorists, since exactly 0 colorists have ever copped to why they are this way and stick with the same tired
I like what I like.
Pretending that you don't have internalized anti-blackness perpetuates one's internalized anti-blackness, and this is exactly what pops up in these circular arguments that I keep seeing time and time again. I don't have time to be arguing with males about their preference, cough misogynoir cough, in these comment sections. I am busy doing literally anything else. The preferences can have them. Please, have them. For real. I only care about the rhetoric from colorists insofar as the effects it can have on the self-esteem and worldview of little black girls and boys. I've linked a 2017 paper by J. Camille Hall about the psychosocial impact of colorism on black women, and in that paper, Hall explains how, at the time of publishing at least, economics analysis showed an intraracial wage gap between light and dark-skinned black Americans. Colorism affects the relational, economic, educational, and social, and Hall digs into how these factors affect the psychological welfare of black women. In another study, it became evident that the shade of your skin affects how you're remembered, which they called skin tone memory bias in the study. This one was done about 9 years ago, but I don't think we've made 9 years worth of progress since it was published. Anyway, participants were shown a black man's face and then primed with stereotypical characteristics like ignorant, and then they also primed the study participants with counter-stereotypical words like educated. The same man was remembered as darker skinned with the stereotypical / negative characteristics, and he was remembered as whiter with the counter stereotypical qualities. Now, both of these studies are telling us things we've been knew, if we're being real. Still, these, to me, are far more grave consequences of colorism than some self-hating black males' preferences, because it means that black people who upend social stereotypes may not be upending them at all, necessarily. Thanks to colorism, they'll probably just be remembered as lighter-skinned, further enshrining status quo notions about dark-skinned people versus light-skinned people. So much for black excellence, but then again, I told y'all a long time ago about my issues with black excellence. Colorism in healthcare, reproductive healthcare, education, work environments, and law enforcement are far more urgent matters than scolding passport bros. Scolding them for what? Who gives a shit about passport bros? I say again, count your blessing and let them be someone else's problem. The algorithms absolutely push this type of colorism vis-a-vis desirability content endlessly, here on YouTube and with content creators on other platforms who often, sometimes only, talk about colorism, who only talk about anti-black, black males and their preferences. Not to go all hotep on y'all, but all this does is successfully continue to divide the chronically online sect, especially into getting a likely skewed perception of what our attitudes actually are toward each other in the real world. Based on how this type of content performs, there is a bag to be made in making us see each other as enemies in an endless diaspora gender war that may or may not even be real. You stay in the gutter with broken self-hating males, then those are the only males you will ever encounter, and you'll start to believe that men don't exist. And I'm saying this as a black woman who lives in Los Angeles, arguably the mecca of the where the white women at sector of black males. Truth be told, there's almost certainly no such thing as a former colorist. Like I said before, at best, you'll just shame them into keeping their colorism to themselves and or within the company of their colorist compatriots. Either way, we don't want them. Even more than changing how we talk about colorism, we need to stop centering womanhood and femininity solely on romantic relationships with men and discussing everything through the prism of the male gaze. Look, this is honestly a massive topic unto itself that deserves its own time, but continuing to speak about women, femininity, empowerment, and liberation solely as functions of which men want us and which ones don't, doing this will continue to shift the focus from other substantive concerns in our communities and home, which has horrible consequences on the emotional health and overall quality of life for so many black women, men, and children. To me, the focus needs to be on how colorism impacts material conditions like children's self-esteem, how black kids are being raised and socialized, access to housing, police encounters, access to medical care, access to professional opportunities. The focus should be here, not on who doesn't want to date unambiguously black women. I definitely don't think that the several, really a lot of conversations about colorism that we've had were pointless, even if they were couched in pretty politics entirely too often. J. Camille Hall concludes in that study I mentioned earlier that openly discussing the inequalities and subsequent emotional abuse that result from colorism is the first step in eradicating it. That study covers colorism not only in terms of getting shows, which is what I'd like to move on from, but also the various intra-racial aspects of colorist emotional abuse, like within families, in school, and in other social situations. I'll add to the emotional abuse that it is critical to discuss the systemic abuses of colorism as a step in eradicating it. Prime example in this surveillance state that we now live in, facial recognition technology. Research shows that facial recognition technology is less accurate when seeking to identify darker skinned faces, which can have life-ruining, sometimes life-ending consequences. Technology does evolve rapidly, but it will always be hamstrung by the biases and potential psychopathy of the humans behind it. Just like the YouTube algorithm isn't unbiased, neither is the surveillance state. In one study from a few years ago, darker-skinned women were the most misidentified group with an error rate of nearly 35%. This was according to research done at MIT, by the way, not somebody's Instagram poll. Sources below. So I think we need to get to a place where we are no longer even entertaining being in romantic partnerships with those who are abusing us emotionally because they're colorists. Let them go where they're probably also unwanted. That should be the least of our concerns. All right, that's really it. Keeping it short-ish today in this tea talk because my thoughts on this are not especially complicated, even though the issue of colorism itself is quite complicated. But let me know in the comments if any of you guys understand where I'm coming from with this, or if you think we, in fact, do need to continue talking about which women incel males find attractive or not, based entirely on said woman's proximity to European beauty standards. You only tired? Or let me know something completely different, like maybe the last book you read or something you're reading right now. Right now, I'm reading Kwame Ture's autobiography, and it is so dope. I actually bought it sometime last year from a Black woman-owned bookstore here in LA called Reparations Club, which I will also link below. This book is like 700 pages, so when it came to starting it on my own, I just kept kicking the can down the road over and over and over. But some homies I'm in community with, Black men, not males, Black men, suggested it as our book for Black August this year, so it worked out exactly as it should. If you don't know what Black August is, I will link an explainer that I posted for my patrons and my local supporters at the start of the month below, but anyway, thanks for hanging out with me all the way to the end. Stay safe, stay dangerous, and long live Jonathan and George Jackson. Bye-bye.
That's some nappy-headed hose there, I'm going to tell you that now.